What was the worst? Why the F did I say that moment? 5th grade in school. About 300 kids in the auditorium for a DARE presentation. A speaker started off by having all of us scream why whenever he would say a statement and then ask us, do you know why? Fast forward mid presentation and he asked, do you know why again? I screamed why so hard it could be heard in the cafeteria. Nobody else did. Swallow me earth. Edit. So much organic karma extract. Guess it was worth the cringe. Glad it has made some of you laugh. I was in an interview and the CEO asked me, so tell me a bit about your guilty pleasures. You drink? You smoke? I told him I enjoy a good drink and I am definitely pro marijuana. He then said I meant cigars. At my friend's wedding, which I was standing up in, I walk into the bathroom which has 1 or 2 more men in it than there are stalls and urinals for. My friend says I guess I'll use the handicap stall since it was unoccupied, but apparently he wasn't sure that he should use it. Without missing a beat, I said that's okay. It works for mentally handicapped people too. It was at that point that I realized that it wasn't my friend who said it. Just some guy I didn't know who was in his 40s or 50s. I was 24 at the time. Silence. I quickly go into the other stall which someone had just exited, pissed as fast as possible, and left without washing my hands so I would get out of there before the other guy left the handicap stall. I work in a hospital. I was taking a patient for an x-ray. The patient was in a wheelchair. Me. I suck at steering these things. I'll try not to drive you into a wall. Patient had just spent 6 weeks in bed seriously injured after driving into a wall. My ex said at the dinner table I had a slight webbing on my toe. How do you get that? In front of her entire family. Aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents. I instinctively said inbreeding. Forks dropped, and they all just stared at me. I didn't know what to do or where to look. I just wanted to duck and die. Interview for an administrator in a doctor's surgery. Seems to be going well. Getting through the majority of questions, no issues. No real concerns about my experience or work history, and they seem pleased with what I'm saying. Just 3 or 4 more questions and the interview would be over. More than interviewer, this job can be very stressful. What do you do to release stress? More than me. I've always felt less stress after I've had sex. The interviewer and his assistant completely lost it and burst into laughter. The interview effectively ended there and then. And no, I did not get the job. On the morning of my wedding, the 3rd time I'd met my soon-to-be mother-in-law, I was understandably jittery about the day. Probably not at the top of my game. So, I warmly greeted her by saying, "Hi Linda. It's so good to see you." She's quiet for a moment, and then says, "Actually, it's Laura." I knew it was Laura. I have no clue why I called her Linda. I was mortified, and felt like I had only one way out of the situation. I replied after a pause, "No, I'm pretty sure it's Linda," to her credit, and to this day, whenever she calls me she tells me it's Linda, and I've never called her anything but that since. When they once announced our librarian, horrible lady, had passed away over the PA, my brain faded and I accidentally said, "Looks like she finally got our library to be quiet. RIP." In 5th grade we were at an assembly where they told a story and would hold up cards for the audience to yell. When they held the card that said "gasp," everyone gasped while I screamed the word "gasp" as loud as I have ever screamed anything in my life. Not me, but my husband. He was out drinking with his friends. A girl comes up to him asking if he wants to dance. What he means to say is, "I only dance when I'm drunk, and I'm still sober." But what he actually said was, "I'm not drunk enough to dance with you." I wasn't even there and I can feel that poor girl's self-esteem drop every time he tells the story. I once complimented a girl I know on her cute outfit and asked where she got it. She named a plus-size store. For whatever stupid reason I replied, "Really? I need to gain a bunch of weight so I can shop there." I immediately realized what I had said, and we looked at each other for a moment, looked away, and sat in uncomfortable silence for the rest of class because I'm a jerk. My boss, an elderly ex-military dude, asked me, "How are you doing?" and he amused himself and followed up with, "That reminds me of Joey from Friends. How you doing?" The question was still directed at me though. I responded, "Are you hitting on me?" He turned red and got flustered and stammered, no, my wife is next door. She was visiting the office. Then straightened up and said that was inappropriate and left my office. Why the duck did I say that? Back in 7th grade, a teacher called on me to answer a question. I guess I was a little sick at the time because I needed to clear my throat. Yet decided against it because people might think I'm gross or something. As you can probably guess, that didn't work out well and I sounded like a chronic smoker. Then finally, after trying my hardest to nonchalantly clear my throat, I announced to the class, sorry, I have a speech defect. I do not. This was about 12 years ago. I was chatting with 2 female colleagues during lunch break. When the break was almost over, I wanted to ask, shall we go back to work? Instead, for some reason I asked, shall we go to bed? My face instantly turned red. It was pretty awkward, but we all ended up laughing about it. So I was at a group fitness class and the instructor was known for having weird exercises like bending and swinging one of your arms in a circle and calling it making soup. He gets really into and asks the class what soup they were making. Chicken soup. Tomato soup. He asked me and I panicked and said water. At a funeral, got up to the coffin, asked the widow of the deceased, how are you? Damn it. You know exactly how the duck she is. Why would you ask such a thing? At one point I was having lunch with my then girlfriend. I asked if she wanted to say hi to her friend. She said she didn't see her. I pointed to her and asked, do you not recognize her? Bend over. To which she responded, do you? Job interview was quasi good cop bad cop, I guess you could say. First interviewer came out with some pretty tough questions and I was already a nervous wreck for the interview, as I had applied for something well above what I was qualified for and got the right person's attention. Capital I. Ducking. Bombed. I felt like a total idiot for even thinking I had a shot. Interviewer number 2 comes out and I just blurt out, boy, did I duck that up? He has a good laugh about it with me. We bullet around for 20 or 30 minutes and I started the next week. Still not sure how or why. Got let go from my job by the boss. Early that morning he had chased a robber from his house. The firing was amicable. I understood why but knew it sucked for both of us. Trying to lighten the mood when I walked out, I said, keep your doors locked. He did not think it was a reference to his earlier story. Full stop. Edit. Wow. Thanks for the gold. I worked at a movie theater and an old couple asked for their money back after the half-hour grace period had passed on Brokeback Mountain because they thought it was going to be a normal western. Well, it was set in the West. There were mountains and horses and herding. What exactly wasn't normal about it? The tent. It was a pup tent. They were pretty normal back in the 60s. You know what we mean. So what do you want me to write down? Manager just doesn't let me pass out refunds willy-nilly. The butt ducking, is that it? When they complained to the manager about my language, I was demoted to mopping the restrooms for the next month. Co-worker's 8.5-month pregnant wife was strolling into the office when my 19-year-old mouth said, you're almost as big as your husband. Thought nothing of it until an hour later when my co-worker and I had a chat about hormones. Co-worker asks why I don't have kids or a woman in my life. Why? You offering? I respond. Still haven't lived that down from my sexually aggressive female co-worker. I've had so many in my life but one that sticks out is my 7th grade teacher was telling us about her sister's wedding in Mexico. It was the first day back from summer vacation. I raised my hand and waited for her to call on me. I then asked if they had much so. Immediately kicked out of class. Now here is the thing. On Letterman the night before, a guest was telling him about his Mexican wedding and Letterman asked if they had much so and got huge laughs. Not everyone watches Letterman. Especially not my teacher. I was 15 and in the early stages of my emo phase, so I wore skinny jeans. Except they didn't make skinny jeans for men at the time, so I wore girl jeans. Just as many of my male, skinny jean-bearing friends did. Now for the actual story. I went to a birthday party at a local restaurant, but I didn't normally speak to anyone there except the birthday girl and another one of my buddies. This, alongside my social awkwardness, made it difficult to think of a conversation topic. The girl across from me got up to go to the bathroom and I noticed that she had a familiar pattern on her jeans and thought it was the key to not sitting there awkwardly. As she comes back and sits down, I immediately said, so, I noticed we're wearing the same jeans. I still think about it 8 years later. Edit. It's not the fact that I was wearing girl jeans, as much the fact that it was the first sentence this girl heard from me. I've told this before but I'll never forget it. I took my girlfriend to a very beautiful park and served her a gourmet picnic. After we were finished I nervously took her hand in mine and asked her to marry me. I mumbled, or her ears failed, or I don't know what, but she replied with sure, whatever, obviously missing what I had said. In my mind I thought, Andrew, you idiot, you screwed this up. But out of my mouth came the words, no, you idiot, I'm proposing. Yes, I called my wife an idiot as part of my marriage proposal. After that I kind of blanked out until I saw her crying and saying yes over and over again. Our 18th anniversary is coming up in the spring. Edit. I'm loving all your proposal stories. I'm going to save them up to show to my wife. Apparently there were tons of idiots for her to choose from and I just got incredibly lucky. Love you, Hon. Back in high school, I sought a girlfriend. We'd been dating for maybe 2 months. Invited me over to her house to hang out at their pool and with her family. I went. The dad was very intensely Baptist, of the common sort in the South, and, on my first date with his daughter, had asked me to explain why I deserved to go to heaven. But I sort of got along with them, because I'm generally good at getting along with most of anyone. So I was having a good time that day. Girlfriend, her parents, and I started playing some board game together. There was some friendly banter and smack talk going on. GF and I had watched Anchorman a few days earlier, I'm pretty sure. So I started repeating some of the quotes from what movie back at her for the banter. I knew it was a little risky since the parents didn't let anyone watch anything that wasn't A Walk to Remember or Seventh Heaven. But whatever. There was enough background noise where I got away with it a few times. But then came one of those moments where all background and conversation noise ceases, which coincided with my telling my girlfriend to go back to your home on Whore Island. I muttered a thing or two about being from a movie we watched, which barely helped anything since they definitely saw me as corrupting their good Christian girl from there on out. 7 years ago, as I was working event staff security, it was my responsibility to make sure the drunk people were standing by, in position for their shuttle buses after a baseball game. I saw these two friends. One was holding up the other. As I walked by, I heard the one say SHHH, come on, bus is almost here, to which the other responded, in what I thought was a sarcastic tone, OOOOHH the bus. I chuckled and commented I remembered my first beer. Turns out the one helping the other was the father, taking care of his son that had had a traumatic brain injury 2 years earlier. I apologized profusely, but still feel like it. An ex was explaining she was self-conscious about something, and it was slightly odd, and I intended to say something reassuring and comforting. What I actually said was, that's strange. Of all the things you could be self-conscious about, her face dropped and I realized immediately what I said and unsuccessfully tried to backtrack. Edit. Fixed a couple of words. Do you remember that one episode of SpongeBob where Squidward is in a talent show and no one will clap for him? But then when SpongeBob comes out to mop the floor, everyone cheers? Well, one time in college, I was at MR, my college, and after one of the acts, this tiny nerdy guy came out to mop the stage because there was spilled water or something, and I screamed, yeah, go SpongeBob, and the auditorium went silent, and everyone around me turned and stared. I left shortly after. Edit. A word. I was interviewing for my first job. I was probably 15-16 and nervous as hell. It was a job bussing tables and washing dishes at the golf club catering area. During the interview, the interviewer asked, "Are you punctual?" I replied with, "I think you can tell from my appearance that I'm not punk at all, and I don't really like that kind of music." Next question. "Are you frequently on time to appointments?" And I answered normally, thinking it was just the next question. About 7 years ago, trying to find an original way to compliment my GF, now wife, told her, "You look good in nothing." Fast forward an hour later. Oh wait, no, I meant that you look good naked. Edit. Formatting. Not me but a friend. We were at our mutual friend's birthday party when we were about 6 or 7. The mother brings out a bowl of strawberry punch. To be fair, It really didn't look super appealing, but my friend couldn't keep her mouth shut and said something along the lines of, "Whoa, that looks like a bowl of diarrhea." And the mother got super upset and offended, and I could see immediately the look on my friend's face that they knew they ducked up. Wife's stepmother calls to tell us that wife's father suffered a heart attack while shoveling snow and died. Me, you're kidding me? Her. Solid 10-second silence. No, I'm not kidding you. On a first date, you look different than your profile picture. Fiancé registered signee still hasn't let it go. I was making out with this girl I'd had a crush on for years. After a few minutes, she whispers, "Do you want to go take a shower?" 10 seconds of silence. Then, cue my drunken reply, "OHH, you mean together?" My then future mother-in-law asked me how I like my steak at one of my first sit-down dinners with my then fiancé registered sign-S family. I said, "If it bleeds, I'll eat it." And then I winked. God damn it. Company Thanksgiving dinner. Sitting next to a group of women complaining about their exes. One of them said something along the lines of, "He's still got his hand and a bottle of lube so he'll be happy." I replied with, "To be honest, we don't even need lube most of the time." Right as everyone in the whole room stopped talking for some reason. My wife walked in on a burglar in our living room earlier this month. She's fine. He ran away and didn't get anything or hurt anyone. And she saw him there, she screamed, ducking, "Excuse me." For days after the event she's been like, "Why was I polite?" Went to a funeral of a friend of mine's dad who I had never met. My friend wasn't crying, so I asked him, "Why aren't you crying? Did you not love your dad?" When I suddenly realized that my brain filter had grossly failed me, he replied that he was all out of tears as 3 days had passed since his death. I felt like an idiot and left within just a few minutes. Ever since that I worry about what to say at funerals. Was at the liquor store a while back, making small talk with the cashier during checkout. Dude is telling me about how one of his friends got hit by a car down the street a few nights ago. No major injuries were sustained, but they still got hospitalized and freaked everyone out. My response? "Ha dang. Well, maybe you should have less friends." My ears started burning immediately and he kind of lets his voice trail off while finishing up the transaction. I later called the place, asked to speak to him, and apologized profusely for saying such a stupid thing. He was laughing about it, thankfully, but agreed that it was out of left field and that he had no idea how to respond. Good times. Was talking to my mom, who was recently divorced from my dad. I asked about an old door that used to be in the garage rafters at their house, asking if she had that or not, which she said she didn't. I then, stupidly, said, "I'm surprised you didn't take that. You ducking took everything else from him." I was a math tutor for grade school kids at a franchise place. One day a middle school aged girl came in several hours after the time she usually does. We didn't do appointments. The kids usually followed routines though. So I asked why she was coming in later than usual, just making small talk, and she said she went to her grandmother's funeral that morning. So I said, "Well, at least that's better than doing math on a Saturday." Trying to joke around. She kind of sheepishly faked a smile and I immediately realized I'm a ducking idiot and walked away instead of apologizing. I just didn't speak to her again for a while, because I'm an idiot. Buying a motorbike in 2009. I wanted to haggle. My first offer was the full asking price. My wife and I were having dinner with her boss, B, and B's husband and new baby. The baby had a loose pocket of skin on her head. My wife had mentioned it before, so I was aware but not really thinking about it. I couldn't see it at the angle that the baby was being held at. B moved the baby to hold her with the other arm, and I saw it move. It was like a large, fleshy blister. It covered half of the back of her head and was partially full of fluid. As the baby was moved, it sloshed. I quietly exclaimed, "That baby needs a hat." B shot daggers out of her eyes at me while her husband suppressed a laugh. Edit, I slipped in where it didn't belong. I went to a funeral last year for my co-worker's father who had just passed away. I was standing there with a couple other people when someone accidentally bumped into me and quickly apologized. The first thing that came out of my mouth was, "What are you trying to kill me?" Painfully awkward silence. Teacher asked me working hard or hardly working. I had a brain fart and said I'm hard. One of my friends heard me say it. I'll never live it down. My mom's mom died when she was young, like 7 or 8. We were at dinner when I was about 14. Typical teenager me was arguing with my mom about something and she said, "Well, I'm the mom. That's why." I followed up with, "How do you know that you're being a mom the right way? Yours died so you don't even know what a good mom is like." My mom promptly started crying and walked out of the restaurant, leaving my dad burning holes through my head with his eyes. I apologized profusely many times but she never forgave me,